When we talk about Brazil, it's common to imagine people in swimwear enjoying the sunshine on the famous Copacabana beach, the festivities of Rio's Carnival, and the 2016 Rio Olympics. However, did you know that not everything is as clear as the gleaming beaches, and that there are challenges in its development? Like any other nation in Latin America, Brazil's colonization was part of the Age of Exploration, a period when European conquerors began to travel the world to expand their empires. In the year 1500, Pedro Álvares Cabral landed in Porto Seguro, a port city between Salvador and Rio de Janeiro. Initially, this region received little attention from the Portuguese Empire, but its fortune changed when fabulous veins of emeralds, diamonds, and gold were discovered in Minas Gerais. This finally attracted more attention, and the city of Rio de Janeiro was founded in 1763. It was at this moment that proper governance was established, transforming the cities and their surroundings. However, by the end of the 19th century, the people were tired of the monarchy and forced the royal family to return to Portugal. On November 15, 1889, Brazil became a republic. In the early 20th century, Brazil faced an economic recession and lacked the necessary infrastructure to enter the rising industrial economy. It wasn't until the 1970s that the presidents of the time enacted economic policies focused on domestic production of goods and finally built the necessary infrastructure expansion to fully embrace industrialization. Today, Brazil has become one of the world's largest economies, with a GDP of $1.83 trillion, surpassing countries like South Korea, Australia, and Russia, and ranking 10th. You may be familiar with an image that has circulated on the internet, showing the stark contrast between the rich and the poor in Brazil. If you've never seen it, it's an image taken in Sao Paulo in 2004 that depicts a dividing wall between a luxury tower and the makeshift houses of a favela. Almost 20 years later, little has changed. One of Brazil's most famous events is the Rio Carnival, an annual celebration held before Ash Wednesday. It's such a popular event that it attracts tourists from all over the world to the city. However, did you know that this carnival is often overshadowed by gang-related crimes and violence? Every few years, we hear about murders linked to samba schools, in which officials or members of a competing samba school vying to be crowned carnival champions are killed by gangs. This happens because samba schools are often backed by precarious or patrons who, more often than not, have ties to criminal syndicates. The competition can be so intense that violence often comes into play. I should also mention the constant problem of corruption in the region. It's no wonder that the inequality rate is high, as people in Brazil have been ranking corruption as the country's biggest problem since 2015. This can be attributed to the scandal that rocked the entire nation in the same year, known as the Operation Car Washington. This scandal involved billions of dollars and more than 80 politicians and members of the business elite in positions of power. It was so notorious that even the former president and now current president, Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, found himself involved. The case started as a routine mission in which an agent was tasked with arresting a former executive of Petrobras, Brazil's state-owned oil company. However, it quickly uncovered a massive web of corruption. Illegal payments of over $5 billion to company executives and politicians were revealed. The Operation Car Wash became one of the biggest news stories in the region and was even called the largest corruption case in world history. According to many international organizations, economic inequality in Brazil has reached extreme levels, and the statistics are not encouraging. The country's wealthiest 5% have the same income as the remaining 95% of the population, meaning half of the wealth is concentrated in just 5% of the population. It's no surprise that Brazil has the highest income concentration among the top 1% of the population compared to other democratic countries. One of the reasons for this is that Brazilian institutions tend to protect those at the top and make those at the bottom more vulnerable through biased policies. People in the higher income bracket enjoy many privileges, such as tax benefits for large corporations and high-earning individuals. Currently, 23 million people in Brazil live in extreme poverty, which accounts for about 11% of the country's population. These people live in favelas, which are informally constructed houses occupied illegally. Favelas are often located on the outskirts of cities or on hillsides. Due to overcrowding, lack of sanitation, and lack of organization, favelas are associated with poor health conditions and high mortality rates. However, because people cannot afford to live elsewhere, they must endure these conditions and remain in the favelas. The government is still trying to address this issue, and one piece of good news is that the number of people with higher levels of education has increased from 7% to almost 20% in the last decade. This theoretically means there will be an increase in employment status and greater equality in the future. However, the truth is that the unemployment challenge has persisted in Brazil since the 2010s. In 2019, the unemployment rate was 12.4% and worsened to 14.7% in June 2021. This is the highest record for the country, as the labor market continues to deteriorate since 2020. However, it's still alarming that 39% of the workforce is in the informal economy, leaving them vulnerable to contract terminations in times of economic uncertainty. This is reflected in a public opinion survey that points to the fear of unemployment as the leading cause of workplace stress in Brazil. Brazil was even called one of the 10 worst countries in the world for workers by the International Trade Union Confederation due to the labor code reform of 2017, which greatly favored employers at the expense of the workforce. This created issues like unfair dismissal procedures, temporary contracts without guaranteed minimum income, subcontracting, and restricted free access to labor justice. Consequently, it has resulted in precarious working conditions, and that's why workplace accidents, forced labor, and child labor practices have not decreased in the last 5 years in the country. Last but not least are the environmental disasters in Brazil. Although the country is considered one of the least vulnerable in the world when it comes to natural disasters, the fact that 85% of these disasters are caused by events related to global warming is alarming. Most of these events can be divided into 3 types: flash floods, landslides, and prolonged droughts. In just the past 5 years, over 10,225 Brazilians have lost their lives to natural disasters. This figure could increase as the risk of these types of disasters occurring will rise by the end of this century due to worsening climate change. Ironically, the country is also partly responsible for climate change because a portion of Brazil lies within the Amazon rainforest, which covers about 40% of Brazil's total area. The Amazon rainforest is the world's largest biological reservoir, housing millions of flora and fauna species. It's considered the lungs of the earth as it contributes to nearly 9% of the world's total oxygen. The rapid growth of industrialization in Brazil is now causing significant harm to parts of the forest, with deforestation reaching alarming levels due to policies reducing environmental protection for commercial exploitation. Approximately 17 to 20% of the Amazon has already been destroyed, and scientists are concerned that we may reach a point of no return when deforestation reaches 25% of the total area. It took a long time, but Brazil has now established its place as one of the world's leading nations. Only time will tell if the country can maintain this position and overcome its dark sides.